So let's talk about case studies, specifically how you can write a case study for your advanced design project. I'm going to walk through this article that's a very general overview to how designers can use case studies, and then we'll look at some more specifics, specific examples, and also how you can work on your advanced design case study and divide the work amongst your group. So imagine that you are looking to hire a designer. You want someone that's a good fit for your team. You want someone that's going to bring a really unique perspective. And you're looking at these two designers who have a very similar quality of work. And the first designer is just showing these images. They look great, but they only really say, like, here's my work. They have one sentence on here. And then designer B is going through their full process. They're giving you the problem that they were trying to solve, their research, their sketches, drafts. They're saying, like, oh, I ran into a problem here and here's how I solved it. Then they're covering next steps and where this might go. Which designer do you know more about? Which designer do you understand? Which designer are you more likely to hire? This is the value of the case study. Case studies give you the opportunity to tell a story about your design and really communicate who you are and how you think. So, most case studies follow a basic structure like this. And we'll talk about it a little bit about how you can look at a case study with your group project. But in general, they do things like introduce, reframe the problem, explain your approach, show the actual work, very important part, and then also wrap everything up with a conclusion. So, what's next? Where could this project go? How is a case study different from a pitch? They're very similar, they cover the same types of information, but a case study really lets you get into how you thought. A case study is written so you have more time, you can show a lot more images, you can use alt text to describe images, you can really get into why, very, very detailed into the why specifically. But it's also important that you consider your audience when you're trying to decide how to present your case study versus your design pitch. And you may be saying to yourself, especially with a case study, because it is all about the written word, you may be saying, I'm a designer, I'm not a writer. But graphic design is all about communication. So even if you don't consider yourself to be a writer, part of the job of any designer is to create meaning. And writing is a skill, just like drawing is a skill, just like code is a skill, just like using the tools is a skill, writing is a skill. One great resource that I'm going to reference a couple times here is called Writing by Designers. And it's an ebook here you can get. You can also get a physical book. You can, if you enter your email address, you can get a great sample chapter. It's a really, really valuable resource as any designer. Refresh this page here. And the author of that book goes through 4 basic steps to any writing. So that's prepare to write, compose the words, edit what you wrote, and then finish the writing. So when you're preparing, that's just like the early stages of design. You define the problem. When it comes to a case study, that means, how long does my case study need to be? What's my structure of my case study? How much do I need to talk about? What's the deadline? Collect all of the assets for your writing just like you would collect images and text for a design. So collect all of your process. For advanced design, that means collecting your group's process. Review and organize your notes. Take a look at what you submitted to Canvas or on Miro, or what you were talking with your group about on Slack. Take a look at what you've been saying and organize your notes, sketches, and drafts. Organize this to get a sense of what kind of story you can tell. Just like you do with design, don't let the blank page intimidate you. Use things like mind mapping and brainstorming to organize your thoughts. Maybe go into Miro and set up post it notes with your group to figure out what's the best way to tell this story. The basic case study structure can be an outline for this. So you can look at introduction, reframe the problem, explain your approach, show the deliverables, and then conclude everything. Again, that's the wireframe for your writing. In step 2, you're actually doing that writing. You're composing the words. You're getting those words on paper. So you can do this in a Google Doc. Kubi advises that designers write quickly and write everything. So don't try to be perfect, but just get something down. Try to write a little something for every section of that outline. And if you're really stuck, just write one word, one thing. Keep writing until you have a full first draft. And it might be terrible, but there's plenty of time to revise your writing in the next step. When you're writing, after you've got that first draft done, you can think about, how are you telling a story? Focus on the problem that you solve with your design. You can really establish the plot in the early sections of your case study, and then you can show the conflict that came up. Your story is building, and you're building and showing how you thought through things, building to these final deliverables. You can also be specific. Think about how a phrase like 73% of people preferred option B. That's more interesting than like most people preferred option B. You can use emotion. You can say, we were surprised to find, or people were frustrated by. These are things you can cover. When it comes to advanced design, maybe talk about how, families are really struggling. Families are feeling stressed out, which is why we wanted to entertain them. We were very concerned to find out that a lot of garbage is generated from packaging of food. So we wanted to solve that problem. So really think about how you can use emotion. Think about statistics you can bring into this. And then make sure with your case study that you aren't just describing the words. So, don't just say, like, this logo uses Helvetica. When it comes to advanced design, don't just say, like, here is a menu. Talk about what's happening. Don't just describe the work. You should use descriptions in something like alt text. So when you examine the image, you want to have that text so that the image is labeled properly. But in the actual body of the case study, talk about what's not on screen. Nguyen in this article up here describes as it is these things that are not shown on the screen that make us designers. So write about why the design is the way it is. Write about what we're not seeing. So the third step is editing. And that's different from proofreading. So it's not about just like, oh, there's a spelling mistake here. Editing is about the content and the structure of the writing. Now, during the editing process, consider why you are making any changes. Can you add information to a section to provide greater meaning? Can you simplify a section to make it more clear? Can you reword something so that it's got the right personality or tone for your brand? Try reading the case study out loud or have someone else read it to you. It can be a great idea to go through a group case study with your group. Read it out loud. Have another group member read it out loud. You might find things you might realize, oh, this isn't very clear. And in an interview with CaseStudy.club, Tobias Van Schneider recommends give enough information to be informative, but get to the point. He says, I want to understand your process, but I don't need to know your user persona better than I know my own mother. So be descriptive, but don't be too overwhelming with information. Editing might be a good time to actually cut details out. Think about how your readers will take in information. Readers online tend to scan rather than read every single thing. Readers pay attention to things that stand out visually, so don't forget about hierarchy. Consider paragraph breaks. Don't give a very long column of text. Give nice little paragraph breaks. Call out important information. Use things like section headers. Use bullet points. If something's important, you could italicize or make it bold. You could put things again in lists. And also make sure you take a break between the writing and the editing. Step away from your computer, get a night's sleep, switch to a different task, maybe hand this off to a group member to take a look at, but really just make sure you're giving yourself a chance to take a break. Throughout this whole process, keep track of the changes that you're making in case you ever want to go back. Google Docs are a good way to track the changes that have been made. You can also save different versions of that. You can save written pages and notebooks, but make sure you're saving the process, especially if you're working with your team. And the last step is finishing. So, in the same way that a design is never quite finished, you might feel that your writing is not quite complete ever. But you reach a certain point where the writing and the work are done. And at this point, this is when you proofread. So find someone new to read your case study and point out errors. That might be your instructor, that might be another group member, that might be a roommate. You can also try reading it backwards. So if you go from the end of a paragraph to the beginning, so I might say like proofread, you, help, to, and I can find things like errors that are in spelling or grammar issues. You can also use a tool like Grammarly to help you proofread. Those are the basic steps to how to write. And again, the value of the case study is that you can talk about any kind of design, but you're telling a story with that. And a well-written case study highlights not just your work, but also it highlights you as a designer. It acts as a platform to show off how you approach problems, how you think, and it also gives you a chance to reflect. So when we're talking about this group project, it gives your group a chance to reflect and think about like, oh, I actually did learn a lot this semester, or it's crazy to see how we went in all of these different directions from the same prompt. It's a really valuable chance to take a look at your work, take a step back, and show off how you thought. So there are some links on here to some great examples of case studies that I'll show in a moment, and also some additional resources. So the articles that I referenced, and also a list of case studies and other writing from the Tyler GAID program. So I'm just going to briefly here walk through some example case studies that show off how designers can use case studies. We often think about case studies for user experience projects or apps, but there are a lot of ways that a designer can use a case study. So here's a great example of an illustration case study. This is about creating Slack's illustration voice, and this is on the designer's portfolio page. So you can see there, Alice Lee here is describing the client, describing the issue that they wanted to deal with. They're talking about the background of how illustration is used for brands, their opinion of these brands, and they're going to talk through their approach to researching, analyzing, and how to actually bring warmth and character design into a branded illustration voice. So here are mood boards, walking through specifically who the illustrators in these mood boards were. Here are some more mood boards, and these are some of this designer's past illustrations. So using these as more inspiration. This is looking at concepts, so color palettes, things like that. And notice there's also these little illustration details inside the case study that make it interesting. There's some sketches talking about the concept, why they use the mood boards, their process, looking at different color explorations, how they incorporated them. And here's this sketch idea, bringing the other color iterations into this, looking at the different versions of exploration. Here are some sketches. And then here's the final artwork. So we really see the full process here with a lot of examples. And after they settle on a style, we can see the sketch and then the final. After they settle on a style, they talk about like where they go next. They built out an entire, 40 plus illustration library for Slack to use. So here's all of these graphics, all of these graphic examples. But before we get to those, we saw all of those great visuals. We saw that process. And then there's even some quotes about like what was great about this work. And then also applying it, as a product design. So how can you rework these? How can you mix these? How can you do spot illustration? And then it ends with who was involved, thanking the people who were involved and where you can find the work. Tons and tons and tons of work. So there's even some extra information. So this is within a design portfolio. And this is specifically about illustration. This example is a little more technical. So this is a little bit more of a UX project. So again, scrolling down here, there's a description of the project, this designer's role in the project, what they did in this role. So if you do an individual case study ever, it's a good idea to cover like, here's what my job was, especially if you're working with a team, the year that it was done. So looking at the problems, looking at specific aspects that they were looking at within that problem, some examples of images here. So it's a good idea to show sometimes final work at the beginning to get people excited. And this is kind of really, again, looking at the background. There's data in here. So here's user attitudes towards, keeping track of TV shows. Here we can see some images of their process. So here's a journey map. So you might show things like personas, you might show journey maps. Here's wireframe, prototype, organize. Post-it images with or without an extra little funny illustration. Post-it images are very popular in case studies. Here's a basic wireframe. So this is a wire flow. It's the user flow plus the wireframe. More wireframing. There's a link to see them in high res. Looking at a modular design. So this is really an expanded version of a style tile. And then looking at the final work. So GIFs are a really great way to show something moving. So anything motion-based, a website, an app, doing it as a GIF is a really great way to show that off so that no one has to sit through an entire video, but you can still see how things animate and how things work. Lots and lots of final graphics, details, walking through these different kinds of stages with the app. You might do a screenshot of the entire thing in a program. So this is in Sketch, so you can show here's all of the designs that were put together. And then here are some examples from within Medium. So those first two were within specific designers' portfolio sites. They had a little more control over the style of the actual case study. but these ones here are inside Medium. This is another app one, but it's a very illustrated app. So we can see the opening interface. These are wireframes inside the context. We have a little bit of a background. We have this great big graphic that gets us excited. We see the actual final project. We can scroll down here, and then here's the process of creating the map. So here's like a mood board for reference. Getting into the process of actually building the map. There's step 1, step 2, step 3. So we can see screenshots of the work in progress, specifically with this illustration. Process of the illustration, and they point out the fact that it's really hard to get a very flat image of a building. So they talk about what problems they had illustrating and where they got inspiration to solve those problems. So this is references that they needed to create accurate illustrations. They didn't expect to run into this problem, but they did. And then showing us these different aspects and then how they brought those illustrations into the app. There's a little video embedded, so you can embed from Vimeo or YouTube. Looking at the brand colors, you might have a style tile. Looking at a lot of different aspects here. So you can make these very long, but as long as you break it up with images, it can still be very interesting. And people can always skim if they're bored by it. This one is a UX case study about how to buy a metro ticket in Paris. Again, starting with the big image, explaining the situation. So here's the problem. This is a hassle to deal with. So this one's opening, instead of the finished work, it's opening with the problem that they're solving. And they even have a Simpsons reference to address this problem and really explain it. And they're showing this is the path that they used to design. So this is their design process visualized as a graphic. And they did theirs in just 5 days. So they break it down by day. So on Monday, this is what they did. There's some graphics in here to explain it. They analyzed the problem with videos. They did a lot of post-it explorations, looking at card sorting, looking at the issue of the angle that they're looking at. So again, this is a graphic to just explain how they were thinking. Problems that they ran into, usability tests, looking at sketches as well as things with post-its, lots about process, objectives. And that was just Monday. So you can, this is looking at Tuesday. They're looking for inspiration. I'm just going to scroll through here. Other inspiration. So here's some photographs of Paris to get some visual inspiration. And then looking at things like wireframes, looking at early drafts. Eventually they added in color, and then they tested it. And again, at the bottom, they're linking to their own website. And then here is a link to, if you want to find examples specifically from Tyler design students, you can look at medium.com/TylerGade. And this is writing specifically from students and faculty in this program. So you can see a ton of examples of mostly case studies, a couple articles, but mostly case studies of design work. So I'm going to show a couple of these. So this first one is the Jersey Cape, and this is a case study of a rebrand of the Jersey Shore. So looking at the different beaches on the New Jersey shore. So this is giving, again, big image that invites us in, makes us excited, makes us want to read more about this. There's some background on this, looking at the history of beach tags, explaining, what is this that we're looking at? Research, so here's early sketches. They don't have to be beautiful. They can be really rough sketches, but showing us some sketches, showing us some process, showing us early versions of this. And so here are the 9 final designs of the suggested beach designs. So you can show us the final work here. You can show us sketches and then show us the final work to get us really excited. And then walking through, here's the logo. Here's the logic of the tags. So there's a difference between a month-long pass and a seasonal pass. If we just saw this image without the description, we might be like, oh, it's a different color. I don't really understand. So we can learn more with these descriptions. Looking at how this evolved, looking at mock-ups, looking at other aspects. So in addition to those tags, this map was designed. And so with this case study, she's looking at the process for each deliverable. So this was the tags with a little bit of process and explanation. This is the map with some process and explanation with the recording embedded in here. for the website, showing notes and sketches for the website, talking about process, showing note card wireframes. Here's an image of the process. Here is the actual, like a screenshot of the XD file is a good way of showing process. Looking at screenshots, you can go wide with these to show more of them. Lots and lots of examples here. This one is a UX UI case study. So this is for an app, starting with the final logo and starting with the final visuals of the app. So defining the problem, showing a GIF instead of a full video. This is a great way to show quickly how something that's interactive might work. This is describing how the final app works, and then getting into the research. So a survey was conducted. Here are user personas. Here's the logo process, showing the evolution of where the logo went. Looking at the user flow, style tile, and then citing who was involved with the project. And then this last one is an example of a case study that talks about a group project. So this is looking at the Create event from last spring. And it was supposed to be an in-person event, and then it became a virtual event because of COVID-19. So this is following a lot of those examples that make a really great case study. So it's framing the problem, it's framing, what this event was, who's involved, looking at specific numbers. So there was an increase of 25% from year to year of attendance. That's a very specific number that makes it exciting to look at. This is who was involved with the project. This is different tasks that people had. So you can list everyone in your group and you can give everyone you can give them their job title in your case study. Using language like our roles, we did this, we looked at this, is a great way with your group case study to organize the content and to talk about it and really show that this was a group effort. Showing due dates, showing how you organized work, that's a really big important part of this story. Taking a look at sketches, at brainstorming. And then here's the final logo that resulted from that brainstorming. Here's the style tile for that logo. And again, every step of the way, there's a little explanation that doesn't just describe, but it expands on what we're seeing in the pictures. Looking at this mock-up of a printed design. And then here you can see in the story, like this is where things take a turn. This is when COVID-19 hits everything. There's really a story in this case study. So here's, a Zoom of people working on it. So you might show, like, here's a screenshot of our group working in Zoom. And this is how they adapted to the problem. So here's images of the mock-ups, images inside phones, and images flat. So there's a lot of ways you can show different work. Looking at web screenshots, and then some videos about that work in action. And at the bottom, along with the conclusion, there's, where to find the live work, but also here are, again, the people who are involved and linking to their own Instagram or LinkedIn or website or whatever. So you introduce the team in the very beginning and you also credit everyone at the bottom. And these are all ways these are all examples of case studies that you can use to reference as you work on your group case study. Let's talk about what the group case study will look like for advanced design. And again, the case study is a narrative retelling of the complete design process. It tells the story of your brand, your research, your concept, your design, your application, and it's a crucial part of this course and design in general. You'll be writing your case studies and you'll be posting them on Medium. And it's going to walk through your group's process and your individual designs. So you can review this on Canvas. If we take a look at the roles within the group, the majority of this is the production manager. So the production manager is going to set up the Medium account to publish the article and organize the content. They're going to keep track of all the stages to put in the case study. They're going to keep sketches and brainstorming. They're going to take notes on the process to use as content. They're going to be collecting all of this work. And the production manager in a 4-person group will be working with the presenter to provide support for the presentation as well. The project manager is in charge of copywriting, but there'll be a lot of writing involved in the case study. So the project manager will help to work on writing, but the production manager is really working on organizing and setting up the structure. Everyone involved, though, everyone in your team is going to be working on the case study in some regard because you're all going to be sharing images. You're all going to be working on the design of this case study, the design of the graphics, of any extra symbols. You're all going to be working on the writing as a group in some capacity because you want everything to feel like it belongs to the group. The timeline for this. So a rough draft is going to be due on November 9th. And then on the 18th, you need a full draft in Google Docs. So you're going to have a rough draft in Google Docs on November 9th, and then a full draft in Google Docs on the 18th. And then after Thanksgiving break, the final case study is done and uploaded to Medium December 2nd. So that is the timeline and the due dates for the case study. And so here is just a very quick example case study in Medium. And this is not the full article, but this is just how you might structure your case study. But you're going to start writing it and working with images inside a Google Doc. That's a little bit easier to work on as a group, a little bit easier to comment on. So you're going to start here. So here's what it looks like on Medium. Here's what it might look like in a Google Doc. So you'll say, here's a title, here's a subtitle. You might look at different section headers, and in a Google Doc, you can do things like different levels of headings. You'll put your images in here. You'll think about what the caption to your image is. You'll think about your process. So this is generally what it might look like. And then when you are ready to share it for review, so when you go to submit your draft, right now, if I share this link, no one can read it. But if I go to share, and then here it says it's only people added can open this link. I want to change that. So change that link to Temple University can comment. You might even change it to can edit, but you want to at least do comment. So change it to anyone in Temple with the link can comment or edit. And that way your instructor can comment, and that way your team members can comment. You might even go beyond Temple and you could say anyone with a link. So anyone with a link can edit would be the loosest. If you're nervous about that, you could say anyone at Temple or anyone with a link can comment. But make sure that anyone, your instructor and your team members, make sure that they can comment on this. And then you'll say done, and then we can copy this link and you can double check. So anyone with a link can comment. So that's going to allow us to share this for feedback. That's how you're going to work with this case study. That's how you're going to work with Google Docs. Once that's approved, once you go through the drafts within Google Docs, you'll set up an account on Medium. So this is medium.com. It's a way of publishing work online. It's free to publish. And if you do create an account and you start to do a lot of writing, you can even potentially get paid from the writing. There's no ads on the platform. So you can start up here with some kind of introductory graphic. Maybe you do finished work here. Maybe you do a graphic that shows your overall branding for your team. Think about how you're designing for the presentation, and you can use whatever designs you use for the presentation. And the case study, you can work together on those designs. So you want to have something up here that really brings us into the presentation. You'll have some kind of headline, some kind of subtitle. You can use section headers. So you want to introduce the team, summarize your group project in a sentence or two, give us a little bit of background. What's the prompt? Who were the designers? Who was involved as a constructor, as a consultant, as the client? Who was your instructor on this project? And talk about specifically what you were trying to solve. So you can go to Canvas and find the project brief for the full course, but what specifically were you trying to address as a team? Was it boredom? Was it food waste? What were you trying to address? You can even use quotes to call it special information. So maybe there was something that a guest speaker said back in the beginning of the semester that you really latched onto as a group. Maybe there's something that you found in your research, or there's something that you want to show, like the mission statement for your company. Think about how you can use a quote here. And then you might want to show finished work early in your case study. So maybe up here or maybe down here, but you might want to show finished work early to get us really excited to read the rest of the project. Then you can explain the process. So you can explain your team's approach. What was the process? You can show us sketches, wireframes, user flows. Show us what worked, what didn't work, all of this stuff. Talk about what you did as a team here. You can add things in Medium. You can add like section breaks, like these dot, dot, dots. After you talk about your team's process, you can get into individual process. So here, everyone should kind of get a section, and then you'll talk about the individual design directions and the individual process. So you'll walk through everyone's process, and you can again have images of sketches. You can show logo process, style tiles. You can really walk through everyone's individual design, their problems, how they solve things, and how they thought about the project. And then you can show everyone's individual final deliverables. So again, I recommend making each person a different section, or you could divide it and say, here's everyone's logo process. Here's the wireframe that we worked on. So you can decide how you break up this decision. And then you can also conclude things. So as a group, conclude, what's next? How would you expand on this? What would you improve if you had more time or resources? Would you want this to be a real restaurant? And what would that mean? Where else could this project go? Maybe you ask for feedback from the audience. You can also include your group's presentation video. Maybe that's the beginning or maybe that's the end, but you can embed a YouTube video in your project. Make sure at the very end that you give credits for everybody. So list everyone involved, team members, your instructor, consultants, and link to those members' websites or social media accounts, things like Instagram and LinkedIn. This is a very basic structure. I'm actually going to edit this as well. So I'm going to go to my stories. And I'm going to edit this to show just a little bit of how you can work with things in Medium. So here with this image, I can change how any image in here is set up. So for a header, I might want it to span the full width, but I can also take a look at this. There's only a few ways you can adjust it, so you're able to focus on just mostly the writing, but there's a few things you can do to dress up the design a bit. When I do go to edit an image, I can also add alt text. So it's really important to describe any images in your presentation. So for this one, I might say, here is an image. What's that? We know it's an image. So we might say like here is wireframes of mobile website, wireframes of the mobile website. And that way, if someone is reading my case study through a screen reader, if they can't see the image, that alt text will describe what's happening in that image. So people still know what that design is like. So we can get into these examples. We can change the stylization of things. So I could say, actually, I want that to be more of a headline. Actually, I want that to be a different kind of quote. So there's a few ways I can stylize things. Again, with my images, I can move them around a little bit. If I want them to be really big or a little small. You can also do grids of images, or you can make your own grids in a program and upload them as like a completed graphic. We can look at different levels of hierarchy for headers. We can embed things. This is embedded through an iframe. So you can go to YouTube and copy the embed code and then paste that here. If I jump over here to YouTube and then I go to share, I can go to embed and I can copy this information and then put that into Medium. And then that's how I can get an embed code here. So if I, for instance, if I wanted that video again, I can hit enter and there's my video right there. And at the end, I want to include my credits. So I can do things like links. So if this is going to be a link, I can put in the link here and that'll become a link. So that's how you would actually, and then once you're finished with it, then you would save and publish. So I'm going to just undo this update, undo the changes I've made, and then save and publish this. And this is unlisted because this is just an example. So overall, this is how you write case studies for this advanced design project.